We will be talking about the latest unemployment numbers, whether or not America's poor have been doing better or worse under the Trump administration. The answer there may surprise you.
Welcome back to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we are bringing you news, politics, and culture without the red and blue treatment. I'm Michelle Witte. I'm back with Bob Schleihuber, starting off today's show, which, as always, we always tell you it's going to be a good show, but it is, and it's a good show on what's already a pretty good day. I want to return to that very interesting report that we just touched on a little bit yesterday in the monologue. The changes in U.S. family finances from 2016 to 2019, evidence from the Survey of Consumer Finances report, because there was some interesting trends pointed out in it, and I want somebody better versed than I am on this to walk me through it. And so, here to help us break things down is Steve Grumbine, founder and CEO of Real Progressives and Real Progress in Action, and host of the podcast Macro and Cheese. Steve, I'm so glad to have you back.
Oh, me too. Thank you so much for having me, guys. I missed you all.
Yeah, we missed you too. And I'm so glad you're here because I was reading this report yesterday, and look, the way the data is interpreted here and presented really surprised me because, and again, I'm like hedging this a lot, but it looks like economically things had been going well for lower income families, for Black and Hispanic families, for families where breadwinners didn't have college degrees, as a couple examples, under Donald Trump. And I found that surprising. So because reader or listeners probably don't have the report in front of them, I'm going to give you a couple examples of how the survey findings were reported and then ask you to help me sort of make sense of them. So as I mentioned yesterday, the report says that median family incomes rose while mean incomes decreased, which could indicate that income distribution narrowed, and the report contrasted this pattern to that of 2010 to 2016 when mean income growth vastly outpaced median income growth, which again could indicate widening of income distribution, which would mean a sort of increase in inequality. But it's not necessarily the case, but they're saying that's what this points to. Another tidbit, between 2016 and 2019, families that were high wealth, had a college education, or identified as white non-Hispanic experienced proportionally smaller income growth than other groups of families, though they continued to have the highest income. When they grouped families by wealth, families at the top of the distribution saw a decline in their average incomes, whereas families in the lower and middle portions of the wealth distribution breakdown all saw gains. And then when you group families by education, families with a college degree saw declines in their income, whereas people with high school diplomas and some college experience saw gains. The income gaps between families with college degrees and those without seem to have decreased. Black non-Hispanic families and white non-Hispanic families experienced similar growth in median income, but mean income fell for white non-Hispanic families and rose slightly for Black non-Hispanic families. So I'll stop there because that's kind of a lot of data, but it sounds like since Trump has been in office, non-white families, families without college degrees, and families earning lower incomes have actually benefited, while for wealthy white families, at least the rate of the increase of their incomes slowed. So, tell me how you think these conclusions were drawn, how accurate you think they are, and how much you think they actually reflect Trump's economic policies.
Well, this is a huge loaded word salad, but it is true. There's a lot of truth in this, and I want to be clear about what it states, though. You know, trickle-down worked, in a sense, for Reagan very well. You were able to see a large number of people benefit and prosper under the Reagan administration. What happens is, as a tightening job market happens, you see those people at the bottom suddenly being able to get more and more pieces of the pie as it expands and grows. So one of the big things that we have here is a situation where Donald Trump has expanded, if you will, the wealth distribution based on the gig economy, a lot of the gig economy. You saw tax cuts. Those tax cuts get money into the economy, even though they're oftentimes frowned upon. Those tax cuts will oftentimes make their rounds through the economy. And even though it's disproportionate, it doesn't make it where we want it to go. It doesn't go to the lowest people directly. What happens is that it does produce a crumb-based economy. So there's people at the bottom rise. Well, there's a lot of people, if you think about it, at the top and middle that were professionals, et cetera, and they have still not fully recovered from the last global financial crisis. They have huge debt burdens from their student loans, and what has happened is a lot of companies have stopped hiring those mid-managers as direct employees and have invested heavily in contract labor. So you get people with a hourly wage without any benefits to support those wages. So it's a very, very much a precarious environment, both for the low end and the high end. But the low end, having no economic anything, it has absolutely everything to do with them being able to prosper with those things. They'll be able to actually maximize things. In other words, the poor at the bottom are finally getting some money into the coffer. They're finally getting something, so it naturally raises them up. That was a little bit of word salad there. Sorry for getting tongue-tied, but the fact of the matter is that whenever you cut taxes, you do have economic activity. A lot of times those taxes or the money from those is not ever brought into the economy. It's actually kept in financial sector, so it never makes it into the real economy. But with the gig economy pushing so many at the bottom into jobs that are temporary or even, kind of a mid-range wage without any good benefits, it is definitely an increase in their lifestyle for sure. But again, here we are.
Yes, I mean, I think Steve just real quick. I think that's so vitally important. It's just like injecting steroids into the economy, and I think we've seen that with the Fed basically keeping interest rates where they are. Donald Trump and his tax cuts to give these huge corporations an influx of money. We're now seeing with the stimulus plans not going to people but going to the banks. They're all ways to basically prop up the economy, which is just kind of a house of cards at some point, and it's ready to collapse on top of itself. But the way in which you're able to do it is then you hide all of these numbers. You rig the unemployment numbers to not include people that have been unemployed for more than a year. You take out the long-term unemployed for people well beyond a year. They're no longer counted. We're not obviously counting young people in their career paths and where they're going. You don't count gig workers the same way as you count people that are in careers. And obviously, I want to talk to you more a little bit about the state of seniors in this country, but the economy and unemployment numbers also don't reflect the crisis that people over 55 are also facing right now. So it's amazing that when you can see the job numbers kind of through one lens in which way the Trump administration wants you to see it and bolster it, but in reality, underneath all of that, it's just absolute trash.
Absolutely correct. That's 100% true. I think ultimately what you see is that, people suddenly are out there spending money. They're out there, enjoying life. They're not really thinking about tomorrow. They're spending it because they got it. They haven't had it. If you think about people that don't have a family backing them, they don't have, any generational wealth. You look at people like Allen Iverson, for example, who are first generation, and they didn't have the strong wealth-based structure that kept them afloat. Poor guy like that, he ends up getting some money. He's out there spending it. And, and what happens? Disaster. And you can see generational wealth. They have structure. They have family. They have support. They have assets. They have things to survive any kind of a downturn. And what you've got here is not really, it's a paper economy. It's not even, there's no structural benefit to the people. It's an economy based in precarity. I think that's the best way I can say it.
It's interesting. I think it's really interesting, too, that the other thing that kind of seems to save the American empire in a lot of people's minds right now is their ability to continue to consume. That hasn't stopped fully. Obviously, in person, we're seeing huge hits on retail shops and brick and mortar shops closing, but people have still been able to, obviously, as you see Amazon stock prices and the wealth of Jeff Bezos radically increase, they've been able to continue to buy stuff. And we have such an economy, precarious economy, but economy based on just junk. And as long as we can continue to get cheap junk from abroad and bring it to the country, Steve, it seems to do enough to really distract people from the real problems that are right in front of them.
Absolutely. And, I got to tell you, we're watching this play out. And, you saw it in the presidential debate the other night. It was like, who can outright the other? They were both trying to prove who was the bigger right winger. And the things that they're talking about, they weren't things of prosperity. They weren't things of benefit to the people. It was really, truly a horrible thing. And this has been the other side of the ledger, if you will, is that we're in a more austere economy right now. We're in an economy that I don't know how to explain this. When you have people that have never had before, and they suddenly have just a little bit of breathing room, it's such a radical shift in their minds just to not be completely without. But then this COVID-19 thing hits, and those same people who are benefiting from it, they're about to get foreclosed. Well, we've talked about this before. We've got a mortgage crisis. We've got a rent crisis. We've got an eviction crisis. We've got bankruptcy crises. We've got people that are literally in that precarity zone that benefited. They're suddenly going to be the ones that are in the most vulnerable spot, and they are in the most vulnerable spot. And this right here is going to shine, I hope it shines a light on the precarity of trickle-down mindsets, of the concept of giving tax cuts to the rich to hope it falls down to the poor. Yeah. And this is exactly what you're seeing right now. I hope the listeners here really, really pick up on that, because it's very easy in the moment when it's high to get swept away and go, daggone, I love this guy. I don't care what he tweets about. I love this guy. But
right. Well, I liked your analogy of the crumb-based economy, because I think that captures what I was hoping we could talk about with this report. You know what I mean? Because I was like, wow, these trends, if this is to be believed, they seem good, except when you have somebody who's got the huge block of Parmesan and a bunch of people who just have a few more crumbs sifting down on them, these little minor trends upward and downward are not going to achieve anything, right? They don't represent momentum toward changing the system.
Absolutely not. You're right.
I did think it was interesting that there was not a lot of discussion of this report. I would have expected Trump's people to be promoting it, although it was pre-COVID, so I guess that's of limited utility right now. But I didn't really see a lot of people on the left addressing it either. When they referenced the report, they would stop at the sort of picture of the way wealth is frozen in this country, but not actually get into addressing what some of these trends appear to be, or addressing the contrast between the trends in 2010 to 2016 and then the ones from 2016 to 2019, which I can understand that it's sort of a lot of effort and that you can be a little bit scared to say well, here's what it looks like, but here's how it's actually not good. But it just seemed a little bit cowardly, right? If you want to get people behind a transformational economic program, then you got to show them why these sort of minor trend changes that can be achieved, as you say, with tax breaks, are not a solution to a system that is sort of, to repeat myself here, so systematically transferring wealth upward or consolidating wealth upward, right?
I couldn't agree more. I am a huge advocate, as we've talked about in the past, for the federal job guarantee. And the federal job guarantee is truly transformative, because what it does is it provides assets, not just cash, but assets. In other words, healthcare is an asset. If you don't have to spend that money, if you're able to know that your health is taken care of, that right there, that's an asset. If you look at the ability to go to school, or you look at the ability to have real honest paid time away, or you get benefits of providing child care, that's a real net benefit. These are things that provide substance and safety and eliminate precarity. And so the federal job guarantee is something that was part of the Green New Deal, which the Biden campaign gleefully shot down. And just in the debate the other night, he went out there and said, the Green New Deal is not my plan, and no, I don't support it. And it's like he spent the entire debate punching left, which didn't make any sense to me. But here you've got a situation where that's exactly what type of transformational program would shift us away from the precarity model that Donald Trump has thrived on. And as long as he can slash taxes, as long as he can drip a couple crumbs from the Parmesan, okay, those people will think that it's raining gold on their heads. And he knows that. Stephanie Kelton came out and said, don't underestimate what just a couple crumbs can do to the loyalty of someone who had no crumbs before. And
right.
That right there is the statement that we should all latch onto. They mocked the tax cuts, and rightfully so. They were a freaking, a sham. But they did have enough of a net benefit to those people at the bottom that it can really, really change the demographics of how you think an election might go. A lot of these poor people, they're not on Twitter looking to see what Donald Trump said. They're not reading the Washington Post, and they're not listening to programs. They don't have the ability to do that. So these people, when they get a benefit, they're just like, hey, I'm eating. Hey,
yeah,
I got a roof over my head today. Hey, I could afford a toothbrush, or I could get a loaf of bread. And that is a serious, serious thing to consider. And I don't want to get into more of the hyperbolic comparisons, but when you bribe people with crumbs and you can buy their loyalty with crumbs, that is a terrifying future, because there's nothing that's changed, and they are still completely and utterly, they have no choice but to pray that that stays in place, because they can't fathom something better.
And no major party is offering something better. You know what I mean? It's not as though the Democrats are offering a non-crumb based, subsistence kind of living here, right? They're not shaving off anymore. People get made fun of for voting against their interests, but is Joe Biden going to enact a single-payer healthcare system? Is Joe Biden definitely going to push through a $15 minimum wage, which is laughably inadequate now anyway? Absolutely not. So,
I look at careerists, people that are trying to get into these administrations, and they really desperately want to get a job there. Now, there's some good that can come from that. Obviously, inserting progressives and other people with a good, robust concept of what economic justice looks like, and what racial justice and criminal, all that stuff, you insert them into various levels of government. Government will fundamentally change. There's value there. But there is a whole bunch of people that are biting their lip right now when they know damn well that Biden isn't offering them anything. But they're biting their lip because they're hoping upon hope that somehow or another they'll be the lucky one that gets in the administration to change everything. And my experience looking back over the course of time, Bill Clinton wrecked us with welfare reform. Obama wrecked us with the longest non-recovery in the history of anything in continued wars. Each of these times we look to them for hope and change or something like that, and each of these times they have outrighted the right. They've decided to go into austerity measures. They've cut spending. They've reduced the deficit. They told us to eat our peas and so forth. And, you see a very, very strong voter shaming effort going on, telling everyone, watch out for the Nazi, watch out for, all this stuff. And there's some truth in this. Guy is a nut job. But they're not offering you anything other than not Trump. I mean, Ice Cube, what a great thing. I don't know if you saw this or not, but Ice Cube came out and said, hey, they've been lying to us all the time. They got money for wars. But look, I got this book, Deficit Myth, and it tells me right here that we could be paying for the war. Why are we as black people not asking for them to do so? Why are we giving away our vote? Why aren't we demanding something in return for that vote? And he's damn right.
Ice Cube's been on a tear lately. And, of course, I don't want this to sound like we are minimizing Trump's other threats, right? Because we're talking in an economic sphere, and of course, none of us here are minimizing the risk he poses to immigrants, to non-white people, to the LGBTQ community, and anything else like that, right? I don't think that, I don't think there's a lot of real merit in the Joe Biden and Trump are exactly the same kind of argument. But I mean, I do think that economic policy affects people's lives greatly, right? And so it is important to point out that in this very, very important aspect, Joe Biden is really not bringing anything more to the table.
I'm sorry. I just want to interject one thing here.
Please.
You can be 100% against Donald Trump, and I am 100% against Donald Trump. But I am telling you, as a guy that understands the history of the Democratic Party and understands the way that these folks operate, that they literally destroyed a movement. They had a chance to ride a movement into this and crush Donald Trump, and they chose to kill it and put up a guy who's barely coherent on the stage and they should be ashamed for that. They should literally hang their heads in shame because of such a dramatic opportunity, not only an opportunity, but such a tragic moment in our history with such a bad guy in Donald Trump. They chose to put everyone's lives at risk by propping up a corpse and a cop. That's what we've been dubbing it, corpse and a cop. And it's just very,
like
very disappointing. Very disappointing that they had an opportunity to take the Bernie Sanders movement, all those energized, intersectional, we had white, gay, straight, black, brown, everyone, all fighting for the same causes, and they stole it from us. And for the life of me, they want me to forget that, and I just can't do it. I can't put that in the back of my mind and pretend like it didn't happen.
No,
so
we shouldn't.
For me, that's the challenge, right? Anyway, yeah. I had to say that.
No, thank you, Steve. We appreciate it. And absolutely, I mean, I think I don't know. I was going to say stay angry, but sometimes that feels a little bit destructive personally, but I'm trying to figure it out. Steve, let's move on to the jobs report and a little bit of because we've been talking about sort of the economic state before the pandemic, and now let's move into where we are now. We got the last jobs report that's going to come out before the election today, and I have to say the way these reports are presented and discussed always annoys me because the focus is always on the sheer number of jobs and not their quality, their pay, their potential for growth or whatever. There's no value placed on the dignity these jobs will or will not afford the people who work them, just whether another temporary $10 an hour part-time position was opened at a mall kiosk somewhere, And I want to be clear, I'm not being dismissive of any type of work. I'm just being dismissive of this attitude that any job is a good job and a good deal. So I guess with that in mind, what do you think this report tells us? Because it didn't exactly meet forecasts.
No. First things first, a lot of companies are not hiring people back. A lot of companies have gone out of business, and they're never going to hire people back. And, some of the trade war stuff that Trump has stoked has also put a hindrance on both the manufacturing sector, the industrial sector, and the people in the rural communities. So there's a huge amount of disparity there as well. I think that ultimately precarity is the name of the game right now. Everybody is living in a state of precarity. And that jobs report, it really, in my opinion, is largely meaningless. You can already tell that it's a very lopsided depression or a lopsided recession. The people that were already okay, it's almost as if it didn't happen. The worst thing is they're trapped in their house. The rest of them, literally, these jobs are so precarious they don't know from one minute to the next if they're going to be employed. I don't think of this as anything more than possibly a charade, and it doesn't have any lasting ability. And no, it didn't grow because what's happening also is as we're opening things up, you're watching the numbers of COVID spike back up again. And as schools open up and so forth, even the sports leagues with their stands empty, I think that people are so desperate to get back to work, back to normal, that they're missing that veneer, the real substantive argument here, which is this is no recovery. These jobs are not coming back, and it's not going to meet. And there's millions upon millions upon millions of people that are beyond in a precarious. And we haven't even begun to see. Like student loans are dropped until the end of the year, but once those kick back in, wow. You've got mortgages that are due to have to start being paid at the end of October. You've got all these rents and stuff that have been kind of temporarily put on hold, but once that hits, wow, you talk about despair. Unless something is done, and I see goodness, Congress has had plenty of time to do something. They haven't done anything. So I don't see any real hope right now.
Talking about the Democrats putting a bill forward there in the House, obviously Democrats against anything that gets put out there. Just one last thought here with about a minute left from you, Steve Grumbine. For me, the other big group of people that just are not talked about whatsoever because they kind of fall outside of the working class, you think about our seniors in this country and those above the age of 55. You get in this kind of precarious situation where a lot of companies don't want to hire older workers. A lot of the work that is able to be found is physically demanding, and we don't have a very robust welfare system in this country that treats these seniors with respect or dignity. That's another thing I think is just dramatically overlooked, and I just wanted any final thoughts before we let you go.
I think you're right on. I think seniors would benefit tremendously from a federal job guarantee, the ability for them to be a part of a community and be able to help locally without having to do stuff like that, to maybe be a friend, be a mentor, play chess with somebody who's sick, maybe, do care work, they could be involved in the community with a job guarantee. That doesn't exist. We have no solutions there. We have not seen Social Security rise in any meaningful way in forever. Instead, they're looking at making it even more precarious. So it's horrible. You nailed it, Bob. You nailed it. There's just nothing good in sight on that.
Yeah, that was Steve Grumbine. Go ahead, Michelle.
Well, I was going to say, Bob, that was the inestimable Steve Grumbine. So I beat you to it. Founder of Real Progressives and Real Progress in Action and the host of the podcast Macro and Cheese. Steve, so glad you could come on to help break down that report for us. And where should our listeners go to find more of your work online?
Yes, please come to our new website. It's at www.realprogressive.org, and you'll find our podcast under media. We've got so much information there. Please come check us out, learn all about the economy, learn how to enable a progressive revolution, and hopefully we'll find people that will actually help us make it happen.
Yes. All right. Well, best of luck, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again very soon. And of course, you heard him on Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik. We are live in DC, and we'll be back right after this.